Okay, picture this. You were in the middle of Target. Your 4-year-old wanted that shiny plastic toy. You reasonably said no.
And then it happened. The meltdown. We're talking screaming, kicking, the full-body, boneless flop onto that famously sticky linoleum floor.
And right there, in that moment, the whole philosophy you've so carefully built your parenting on, it just starts to crumble. We're going to get into why. And, believe it or not, how a really brutal truth from ancient China might be the exact thing you need to hear.
I mean, you did everything right, didn't you? You got right down on their level. You used that super calm, soothing voice you've practiced in the mirror. You nailed the script. I see you're having some really big feelings. I'm holding space for your anger. You followed the gentle parenting playbook perfectly.
And what did you get for all that effort? They probably slapped your hand away and screamed even louder. It's like all your patience, all your validation just poured gasoline on the fire. And I know that voice in your head on the car ride home, the one that whispers, if I was just a little more patient, if I had just validated them better, this wouldn't have happened. That feeling of failure, that shame, wow, it is just crushing. So, I need you to hear this, really hear it. It is not your fault. Let me say that one more time. It is not your fault.
See, you think the problem is your patience, or your technique, or that you're just failing somehow. But what if the problem isn't how you're doing it? What if the problem is the entire operating system you're using? It's the philosophy itself. To get why, you have to look at the idea baked into almost all modern parenting. Let's call it the angel theory. You know, the belief that kids are born as these perfectly good, angelic beings, and our job is basically just to not mess it up, to protect that goodness and let it bloom.
But what if that foundational belief is just, well, wrong? Turns out there's a philosopher from way back in 3rd century BC China who would look at that angel theory and say, yeah, that is complete and utter nonsense.
His name was Xunzi, and he looked at the world around him. You know, the jealousy, the greed, the tantrums in the ancient Chinese marketplace, and he came to a pretty shocking conclusion. Human nature is evil.
Whoa, okay, hang on. Before you click away, let's get really clear on this. Xunzi didn't mean your kid is like a tiny villain. The word he used for evil is much closer to our idea of animalistic. He just meant that we're born like any other animal, hungry, selfish, and completely driven by our impulses. We want what we want, and we want it now. I mean, think about it. If you leave a bunch of toddlers to their own natural state with a pile of toys, do they form a perfect sharing co-op? Of course not. They hoard, they grab, they pull hair. That, Xunzi would say, is our nature.
And to make this idea really stick, he came up with this brilliant metaphor: the crooked wood.
Imagine a piece of wood that's all twisted and gnarly. That's human nature in its raw form. Now, according to the angel theory, you should just, water it, validate its feelings, and give it space. And what happens? Absolutely nothing. It stays a twisted, gnarly piece of wood. Sound familiar?
So what actually works? Xunzi says if you want to straighten that wood, you need an external force. You have to apply steam to make it bendy, pressure to actually change its shape, and a frame to hold it there until it becomes straight. This active, deliberate work, he called that way. It's artificial. It takes real effort.
And once you really get this, it changes everything. It frees you from that awful, crushing guilt you feel every time you have to enforce a rule or say no.
Because it totally reframes your job. Things like kindness, sharing, empathy, they're not natural qualities just waiting to pop out. They are learned skills. It's like learning to play the piano or speak another language. And guess what? You're the teacher.
This right here is the whole mindset shift. When you have to set a firm boundary, when you say no and you actually mean it, it feels like you're being mean, doesn't it? But you're not. You are applying the steam. You are bending the wood. You are doing the hard, necessary work of building a good human.
Your job isn't to be their buddy who never makes them sad, and it's not to be their therapist who only ever validates. Your job, in this way of thinking, is to be that essential external force. You are the one who transforms a selfish little animal into a noble, compassionate person.
So please, stop waiting. Stop waiting for their inner goodness to just show up in the middle of a tantrum. It's not there yet. You are the one who has to build it. You have to put it there, piece by piece, lesson by lesson. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. Are you just raising a wildflower, kind of hoping it doesn't grow too many thorns? Or are you brave enough to be the gardener, the one who isn't afraid to prune the branches, to do the hard work, to shape that crooked wood into an absolute masterpiece?
Subscribe for daily wisdom.